Okay, so hello, Sandra.
Hello.
Great to have you here, and I'm so thrilled that you allowed your personal time to answer a few questions about your relationship and your journey. And I know a little bit about that journey, but I would like you to tell us what you've gone through and just tell your story. So before we start going into the relationship with your husband.
Right. Do you want a brief story, or a little bit of a middle, or a longer?
As you wish. Just tell us what the story has been. So, in terms of you coming into that relationship, and um, just a little bit of background about you, who you are.
Well, I met my husband when I was 18. He was in the police force, and I was driving home, and he stopped me. So that's how we met.
Oh,
I'd had some dealings with the police, not personally, but some family members. So I wasn't really very comfortable around those people. So I didn't actually find it in any way, and so I just sort of fobbed him off a bit, and he eventually tracked me down, and we started going out with each other. And there was something about him. He was very different from the men I used to be attracted. Show charming, charismatic, organising type men, to be honest. And I was drawn to those sort of men. So my husband wasn't really my first choice of man. And we started going out, and then the rest is history, really. But we had 3 children. He went on permanent night duty quite quickly into our marriage, which I think was the beginning of some of our major issues. But to be honest, I had personal problems before I ever met him. I had very low self-esteem, low self-worth. I didn't know what a boundary was, let alone to set one. I wasn't comfortable enough with myself to say this isn't okay and this is what I need and this is how I feel. I hadn't learned those skills to articulate myself as a child. My parents didn't teach me them as role models. They were wonderful people, but they did the silent treatment, or no one spoke to each other. They didn't really stop and say, look, I feel vulnerable, I'm scared, or I'm ashamed, or I'm upset. They didn't do feelings.
Yeah.
So consequently, the beginning of our marriage, I think the first episode that I realised I was living a lie is when a friend of his came round to sort our mortgage out, and I was only young, about 20. We just bought our first house, 20 years old, and we're just about to get married, and he said, I want you to make him a cake. So I thought, oh God, I can't cook. So I bought the cake, a frozen cake, and I defrosted it. And then his friend said, oh, this is wonderful. Is it a birthday cake? And I said, oh no, I made it, which wasn't true. And then I thought, I felt uncomfortable about this lie. So I remember one day walking in the supermarket with my husband. I thought, I'm just going to tell him. So I exposed myself and said, look, I've got to be honest, I didn't make it. And he was so angry with me. He said, you serious? You lied? And he made such a big deal with it. I stand my ground and think, well, that's his stuff. I've said I'm sorry. So I backed down, and it was almost like that was the beginning of the rest of my life. I just went, no, I made it really. I'm only joking. And then I made a few more to pretend. And then my marriage was never really based on truth. It was really this inauthenticity, inability to be inauthentic. So that really, I can go on about all different incidents, but I never really had enough comfortability in myself and confidence to look my husband in the eyes and say, I'm not comfortable about that. I don't feel happy about that. And then let the consequences be. He was I'm quite a strong character, and people always thought I was the one, like, she's got the trousers on is the English expression, whereas it was definitely the other way round. I was quite scared of him, and I don't mean he ever hurt me or hit me or anything, but there was an emotional fear, and I wanted to be a good girl. That's what I'd done all my whole life. I want to be good, and I want him to think I'm wonderful, so I constantly strived to be a better wife, but forgetting my own needs. I remember once someone said, after my 3rd son, I had 3 sons within 4.5 years.
Wow.
Someone said, did your wife ever get postnatal depression? He said, oh, she hasn't got time for that. And he genuinely meant, she's too busy, And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s and he'd worked permanent night duty for a long time. I'd been shoving all these emotions down for years, and periodically I'd explode, and then I was okay. And we were pretty happy most of the time, but I just knew I didn't feel comfortable enough to speak like that, and I blamed him. So it was like, well, if only he'd listened, if only he understood me, if only, rather than turn them, like Michael Jackson's song says, "Man in the Mirror," be the change. Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So I had to do some work on myself. So that's sort of a bit about my background, and that work didn't start till I was in my mid-30s.
Wow. So what happened afterwards when you started the self-development work?
Well, I mean, you fall in love with it, don't you? As you and I know. I mean, I'm almost a bit addicted to that. But I started to realise that I had got some addiction. So I'm in a 12-step recovery group for addiction. You may have heard of different addiction groups, which I've been in for about 19 years, which has helped me really do a lot of 12 steps, huge, amazing self-discovery. So I entered into one of those, which was massively helpful. And then I started to get honest, actually. I sat down with my husband. I have done some not great things in my life, which I'm not going to go into detail today, but they're very inappropriate. Lots of different behaviours I've exhibited. And I told him everything, really, which isn't a great thing to do, but clearly it was meant to be for us. And he just had a bit of a breakdown, really, not literally, but he was sobbing and shocked and surprised. And I literally told him all the stuff I was angry about and certain things that I felt about him and our relationship. And, he had counselling, actually, quite soon after. And his counsellor said, "Sandra's just vomited and you've got to clear it up," which wasn't very nice. But it was a bit like that. It was almost like I needed to do that. And from then, this is where our foundation started again. So we started a clean slate. And you either grow or you go after that. If you confess to something or incidents, you either grow closer together or you've had it, and you realise. So, I mean, I was ready to leave. I thought, oh, well, we're split up now. I told him everything. I can go now. But something else happened, and I don't quite know what, but there was enough cement between the brick for us to somehow or other work through it. And then we both had counselling together. And then I realised I wasn't 100% to blame for all the problems in the marriage, because I was the nutty one. I was the one who come from a dysfunctional family. I was the one who was expelled from school, pretty much. I was the one who was, using addictive behaviour. It was all my fault. And of course, when I went into counselling, the counsellor said to Gary, my husband, it's quite funny, we sat there so he said, "She's this, and I just sat there and said, "Yes, I'm that." And then all of a sudden the counsellor said, "And so what part did you play in that?"
Yeah.
And my husband went, "What part?" And then she said, "Yeah, so what part did you play?" And although I don't think he had an aha moment where he thought, I think there was having that third party for me, forget what it was like for him. I thought, I'm not completely bad, so then I think things started to happen and change. And I believe relationships is like a dance. If you've got a bad relationship going on, let's call it the waltz. You're doing the waltz and your husband is doing the waltz and you play this game and you do it. But if you change your dance and do the tango, he's either going to come and do the tango, like I said, or go. So I started to improve my own self-esteem and self-worth. And what I was accepting, behaviour or, playing the martyr or whatever I did, I chose not to do anymore. And all of a sudden I became this incredibly confident woman who started to really love herself with a huge amount of injection of humility. We're not talking ego here. I wasn't walking around going, "Hey." It was very much like, wow, I have a lot more power. I don't have to scream at the top of my voice when I don't get my own way. I can say, I'm really angry about that. That's really pissed me off. And people took me seriously because I started to take me seriously.
That's fascinating. So you've just uncovered some of the very deep stuff, and I was processing as you were saying. So when you shared things with your husband, that really, those secrets or those things that you've been kind of hiding for so many years, thinking, well, that's it, that's the end. What else can I hold? Nothing. So here it is. And letting go of the idea of, maybe that's an end of the marriage. and creating a space in between, something happened afterwards and you started actually reconciling and healing. And then you mentioned that self-development work that helped you to look into yourself and listen to your voice and respecting yourself and having that higher self-esteem for yourself when you didn't need to go out of your balance to attract potential or make things happen, but actually respecting yourself, you let others respect you, in this case your husband. So what happened afterwards?
It makes me cry when it's funny. I've been with my husband for 36 years, like that. And I get excited when he comes home from work. Wow. You know, I actually get excited. We'll go out for bike rides, we go for coffee, we have breakfast every day together, we have dinner over there. We're like, if you saw us in the street, you would think two things. We're either having an affair or we've just met each other. You know, when the phone rings, he says, "Oh, I'm very sorry, I'll just turn that off, excuse me." You know, like if you were courting someone, like, "Hey, how cool is that?" So, sorry, I digress. Your question was, what was your question?
Yeah, what happened afterwards?
What happened? Well, it was a long journey, you know, because my husband used to put me down, not nastily, but he used to say, if it wasn't for me, Sandra would be on the streets, you know, a little bit like that, because he did teach me how to respect money. He did teach me how to not remortgage every 5 minutes, because I was very overindulged as a child. I just wanted everything now. He did teach me consistency and good values, but I wasn't a bad person. And that's the sort of impression, I think. So I started with little tiny things, you know, and say, look, that's not okay. I'm not comfortable when you say that. And it didn't all come with a warm welcome. He didn't go, "Oh, of course." He said, "Oh, don't, it's a bloody stupid," you know, or whatever. And I had to really stand my ground. I remember when I started the quality time stuff, which he thought was rubbish. What a load of rubbish. All that dating night and quality time is rubbish. So I said, well, it might be rubbish to you, and I respect that, but for me, I value it and I would like that. So I remember when we first started meeting for coffee, because I started just very tiny steps, because he worked nights, we didn't spend a lot of time together because we had a family and children. So we'd go out of the house to meet somewhere for coffee, which he thought originally was rubbish. And then within a few months of doing that, if I was 1 minute late, he'd be on the phone saying, "We've got a date, where are you?" You know, he started to value that. And also, I think one of the biggest things I started to do was, in coaching, we talk about what you focus on expands. So if you focus on all the negative things about your partner, because there will be, my husband is not perfect, trust me. If I focus on all those bits, they just get bigger. Yeah. But if I focus on all the positive bits, they get bigger. So I would start to thank him for the little tiny things he did. And sometimes I had to dig a bit deep because I didn't feel like it. Yeah. But it has to be an authentic thank. It can't be just for the sake of it. So I would thank him, you know, "Thank you for coming out for coffee with me. I know you didn't really want to, but it really meant a lot just to have you there." And every human being loves a stroke. Yeah. You know, I don't care who you are, how old you are, there's nothing nicer than a stroke. Yeah. And so he would sort of think, "Oh, I've pleased my wife." Yeah. So he would want to then do more things in turn. Oh. And then it started this, so instead of this inversion and downward sort of lifestyle we were having, it started to open up and come up, because he was then starting to thank me for things, you know. And when we were arguing, I would learn to apologise for my part in something. So it's quite funny, because I'd say, "Well, I'm sorry I called you a miserable blah, 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 blah. That's my part." And then he would say, "And I'm sorry I called you a blah, blah. That's my part." You know, so we started to learn to take more ownership. But that was only because I started to introduce it. And I never told him, "You've got to take ownership." You know, I sort of led, without sounding like I'm some huge, great teacher, I led by example a bit, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started implementing it for yourself, and by creating healthy boundaries and conditions for you to do that, he just mirrored back. He just did what you were doing.
One thing we can't talk about very often, even to this day, is politics. He's got really some strong views. And I agree with him, but I just don't get agitated about it. You know, when he tells, and sometimes he'll start this conversation and I can now say to him, "Do you know, I really respect that irritates you like mad, but I don't feel comfortable talking about it because you get angry and that makes me feel not at peace." So we've even laughed about it. He said, right, okay, I've got it. I'm going to speak to you about politics with a good tone. I'm not going to get angry, but I want to put this point across. I said, great, I'm with you then, I'll listen. And, there's a bit more sense of humour injected in there nowadays. And because we've come, honestly, if I was a horse, you would not have put any of your money on me to even get over the first fence, let alone get the end of the race, because it was that bad. Yeah. But what's interesting is, if it gets that bad, guess what? It can get that good. So almost the worse it is sometimes, the better it can feel. Because you think, well, I've achieved so much.
So there was nothing else to lose. And that freedom allowed for opportunities to arise without demanding things. Because what I find working with couples and clients where they struggle to find peace and create long-term relationship, and they rather go and break up, is because they demand so much from themselves, and as a projection they demand from their partner, that they cannot really satisfy that, and they feel like, well, that's it. But it's a very interesting point of view that you bring, that humility, or maybe that situation where you don't feel much, like you're worth nothing almost, and then allowing that possibility to create worthiness out of sort of mud, like lotus is growing in the swampy area.
I do have that as a visualization sometimes, because I do yoga regularly, and sometimes when I go down and go to pick something up, I think, well, I have not done one thing without a faith. So I don't take the credit, it's not me, because doing it my way was clearly getting me a divorce. It was a real sense of humility and faith in a power greater than myself, which is what's helped me. I really, like my book, someone said to me, I've got a book coming out soon. And someone said, are you going to have a book signing thing? So I said, well, I don't really feel that the credit goes to me. I may or may not, I don't know. It wasn't really a driver for me. I love cameras in my faces and radio. That's a place a medium I feel very comfortable with. But I have to say, with the book, I was like, well, I don't really believe it was this is my purpose, this is my calling, this is what I'm here to help people with. To say, you can have the worst marriage in the world that can be turned around and not just be okay, it can be absolutely fantastic, but you're going to have to do some work.
So, before you tell me, your book is about what? What is the topic?
Well, I've created some tools that help people to take care of themselves, basically. So I talk about, because I think everybody has to validate why they're, I look at you and I think, well, you're beautiful and you're young and, and then if you said to me you're going to talk to me about weight, I'd say, really, you're lovely and stuff. But if you said to me, well, actually, I was overweight, this and this, my ears would prick up and think, well, actually, this woman has been through, you do your work because of whatever reason. Well, for me, it wasn't great. I was overweight, smoked and drunk and was stressed and had marriage problems on top of everything else. So my book is called Know the Truth, because I believe the truth is within all of us. And it actually, I think I showed you a picture of it. I get a bit excited about it because this is the book, just as it's about to come out soon, I just photocopied this because it was just what I liked, the visual. So it's really about going inside and finding the answers. Yeah. And the book is about 3 tools that I've created. So it's a small bit about me, just to qualify why I believe I have the audacity to write a book about knowing the truth. Who am I to say that? So it talks about what it was like for me, what happened and what it's like now in relation to my life as well as my relationship with my husband. And then 3 tools that I've created that help everybody else do what I've done.
And then so can you tell us just one maybe little tool that you can share without sharing too much, so that we can really apply to our life, and especially in relationship when we have that difficult bits, when we are in the heat of a moment, when we're having the conflict. That's the majority of the problems happen.
Well, it's a great question. So, there's so many things, but one of the most incredible tools that I could pass on, my tools are something that you need to look at. You write down some answers, you look at it as a whole perspective. So to pick something out of there. But I would say the biggest tool I've ever had that's helped me is just to breathe, just stop and breathe in the moment and ask myself, I don't have to instantly respond to anything unless there's danger, if it's a fire or I'm falling. But other than that, just to be in my own space and breathe and and feel my own feelings. I think feeling my feelings and using those as a gauge to what the next right thing to do is, because everybody has got those feelings and I don't think we acknowledge them very often. So I think having a breath, obviously having a tool to use for me is having a faith. So, I pray. I ask for guidance. To get this title, I went and did a half an hour mindful meditation and sat down and said, okay, universe, God, whatever you want to call it, I want to have a title that is appealing, that people think, yes, someone said to me once, sell the sizzle, not the sausage. So you're selling the smell of something, and then they buy the sausage anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, definitely I think breathing, being aware of our breath, slowing down and having a sense of faith and, looking within. That's about 4 things, but there you go.
Brilliant, thank you. Wow, so it's an interesting story that, 36 years you said in a marriage.
Yeah, well, together 36. Well, we met in 1978, 88, 98, 2008, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We've been together 38 years.
Wow.
And we've been married for, I think, 35.
So looking back, what can you say about the stages? Can you identify some of those, some say over 7 years, there is like a collapse or a new relationship, and especially for those who are just questioning their relationships, when they have children, when they struggle to connect again, and they see their partner like almost at a distance, and they don't feel connected, or they don't have intimacy or great sex anymore, and we've gone through the parenting stage, we've brought up our children to a certain degree. Shall we split, or shall we stay together? So what helped you stay together, and what can you say to other people who are in similar conditions?
Well, I think the worst thing that people can do is stay together just for the children. I think that's, I hear people say that, and I think, really, what sort of role models are you of 2 people that love each other, who are staying together just for the children? I do believe there's different stages that you go through. First of all, for me, obviously, you've got this courting period, so you first meet and you're, everything about them is just wonderful. You can't stop thinking about them. That's the plan. That's sort of what people generally have. And they have what they call their honeymoon period. And then you start to have children, and then you start to see all the character defects, maybe, someone first thing in the morning, or what they look like, or when they're on their worst day. And that paints, obviously, not such a great picture. And I think familiarity for people, seeing someone day in, day out, how can you get excited about someone you're seeing every single day and waking up to? So I think that's the time when it's really important, from the beginning stages of a relationship, to put something in place that you will carry on regardless of what goes on. I remember when I had my first son, I was 22, and my first thought when I gave birth, as wonderful as it was having him, was, oh, now I'm 3rd in line for a kiss. And that's normally a man's response to a child. It's unusual for a woman to feel like that. I say unusual. Not many women are obsessed by their baby, and their husband gets removed. Whereas I was more obsessed by my husband. I loved my baby, but I was very organised and very disciplined. So my child was going to fit in with me, whereas I felt my husband became very besotted with our children. And I just felt every time I had a baby, I think it's important to have these conversations of what you want as a parent, no one's going to, trust me, every book in the world, you're never going to get it at a textbook. But find out what works for you two. What's really important for you? Have interesting conversations before you have the children. Do you value going to bed early? Do you value sitting down early at the table. Luckily, my husband and I didn't even realise till maybe in the last 10 years, we had so much in common. But that we were so lucky. You know, we love architecture, we love travelling, we love discipline, we love organisation. You know, we were just fell on our feet. You know, the universe wanted us to be together. If you haven't got a certain amount in common, it's much more difficult. You know, if he's a night bird and you're a morning bird and he likes going out at night and you like staying in, it's going to be more difficult to do those stuff. So I think in the courting days when you're having fun, there should be a book that everyone reads or a course that you go on to look at, you know, how are we going to deal with the challenge? You know, what do you think is a good idea? Open it all up while you're still in a great space. That's what I would like to have done.
Wonderful.
Had some fun, gone on some relationship counselling when you're having a great relationship. Then you can laugh and joke and it doesn't matter. Don't wait till it's bloody like ours. Sorry, I swore. Don't wait till it's nearly septic before you're starting to fish all the quagmire out. Let's get in there early. And then I'm about prevention. I don't do cure much. Let's get in on prevention.
Brilliant. It's so in line with also the way I think and the values I hold for the practice and also relationship coaching and looking at two different models. When there's a cure, it's like a surgery. When a couple go into surgery and they're already hurting and they're just bleeding so much in their emotional realm, whereas the couple that made the prevention happen and going through the challenging bits already prepared with tools and strategies that help them, it's just like two different worlds. You know, it's like completely two different models. And wonderful that you said that. So thank you very much.
I mean, my son was in a coma recently and we had to travel to South Africa. He's a famous kite surfer who was in the semi-final of the World Championships and we had to go over. He was in a coma. And my husband and I dealt with it so differently, you know. He was just watching back-to-back films and I just wanted to talk all the time. But because I'm aware of that, I didn't make the relationship uncomfortable because I know that that's what he's like and he sort of knew, and I was able to talk about that. And I said, I find it difficult a little bit that you just want to watch a film back to back, whereas I'm feeling I need to express myself. So we made time to accommodate each other. He listened to me for a short period of time and I let him watch his film, you know, and we talked about it. When I had counselling when I was out there. He didn't want counselling, so I had to have what worked for me. And then we would come back and we'd sit at a mealtime and I say, how are you finding it? You know, what's going on for you? And, you know, I was very much thinking he was going to die and never survive, and he was very much like he's going to be okay. It was really interesting. But it did really, we were under a lot of pressure ourselves, and my brother just died of a massive brain hemorrhage just a matter of days before that. So it was a big upheaval all over the show. But he had a miraculous recovery, and he's kite surfing again now, and he was on the television twice, I think, this week.
Wow.
And he's doing great. But, you know, it's the difficult, it's all very well and great, but it's the difficulties that if you've got those good strategies in and you've consistently had time together, it makes it so much easier to get through those tough times, I think, like you just said.
So knowing a partner's differences and recognizing and accepting a different way of dealing with stress, not demanding them to change, but actually finding time to connect and check in with each other and communicate. And then do things together, and as you said, you know, finding quality time together so you can have.
Tonight, I'm so excited. My husband's going for gardening. Now, it might not be very exciting for anyone else. And he rang me today and said, I'm really looking forward to spending the evening with you. You know, I'm in 37 years, and he's ringing me 2 or 3 times a day, and I ring him. And sometimes I put a little note in his lunchbox saying, I love you, or thank you for what you've done. Or I just think when you really start to focus on the positive stuff, when you've got rid of all the crap, I had to do that first, all the resentment and the anger and the bitterness and all that rubbish. And then every time something comes up that's uncomfortable, because it will do every day, not every day, but things will come up, to talk about it. Okay, I felt a bit uncomfortable when you said that. Up, out, gone. Up, out, gone, rather than what I did. And then my husband would just do one thing and then blah, all this stuff from 1978 would come up. It's like, bloody hell, where did that come from, you know? Because it wasn't processed and released. And that's what I love now, you know, I mean. And I think also that the deep appreciation of what your partner does do for you. I mean, my husband is not as, I like gifts. Buy me lots of gifts. And not that I'm an expensive woman to be with, because it hardly ever happens, but I like gifts, I like surprises, and I like attention. I'm a touchy-feely woman. And I said to him the other night, I don't know if I'm going to stay in this marriage, really. I said, I'm really not getting enough attention. I said, and I don't think you hear me. We were joking about. And, I also don't use humour as I'm very careful not to, we know each other really well, and I'd be comfortable to say exactly what I feel. We were just having a laugh one night. And he said, do you really feel like that? And I said, yeah, I do a bit, actually. I said, just the odd little... No. If I love ships, what they like and what you like are most likely be different things. And so the last few days have been hilarious. I wake up in the morning and he's kissing my face constantly. He said, is that how's that for you? Does that work for you? And it just makes me giggle so much. Or he said, I've got a surprise arranged and we're going to do that. And it's just really nice that he does hear me. And he's really working hard on it, and I thank him. And then another thing in a relationship, which I think people hardly ever say, is, what do I do that annoys you and frustrates you? What could I do that would make you feel happier? Imagine saying that to someone and being completely open to what they say, and then listening to what they say and changing it.
Wow, that's powerful.
I love doing that.
Yeah. So what can I do to make you feel happier instead of, what you're doing that makes me unhappy?
Yeah.
That's very, very true. Actually, two last questions. One is, do you believe in monogamy versus polygamy, in terms of the different people can stay together all their life, or some say, well, I just want all the different relationships. I can't stay in one relationship. Or serial monogamy, some people claim.
I totally think that if you really want peace of mind in your life, you need to be with one person at a time. End of. If you want to be with lots of different people over a period of time, great. End one, start afresh, if that's what works for you. I have no experience of that, but I know that from my personal opinion, I've never felt so much self-love and self-respect since I've really made sure that I am 100% honourable to that one person. And if I didn't want to, I would separate that relationship, have a period of time for healing on my own, look at what worked and what didn't, and then possibly engage into another relationship. I don't think it works. I've heard so many people try that, and it just doesn't seem to work. Not really, because you want trust. The things you want in a relationship is trust. Well, if you're having an affair with someone else, you're not going to have a complete trust. If you want loyalty, you're not going to have that. If you want authenticity and honesty, the biggest thing for me is being authentic. So if you want that and you find somebody who says they want that too, then fine. But I don't believe truly that they feel a deep sense of joy and happiness in that. Because I think they're still searching for something. That's just my personal belief.
Wow. And the last one is, what about your parents' model? Because a lot of the time, people say, well, my parents divorced, so that is my background, and I just, I don't want this relationship, I will divorce as well. How do you think that influences?
Sorry, I overspoke you, so it wasn't a great reception then. My parents were together. My mother's Austrian, and she met my father on a tram in Vienna. It's funny, isn't it? I met my husband with this weird meeting in the police force, and he met me, and then my mum met her husband, my father, on a tram. And she obviously didn't speak, well, you don't know that, but she didn't speak any of our language, so she came over here. So it was a challenge for her to start with, to be in a brand new country and not speak a word of the language. But love, conquers all, doesn't it? So I think they had their challenges, but they stayed together from the whole duration. As role models, they were good, wonderful people. They were kind and loving, and they adored their children. They didn't believe very much in discipline and boundaries because they'd come from children in the war, and they had so much discipline and boundaries it was painful, so they went a bit the other way. So I think they made their life harder for themselves. But as a couple, they were good people. But it did model the relationship that I'm in today. What I model for my children, I think, is amazing. And I don't mean that egotistically, but I think, how amazing is it that my children see me say to my husband, do you know, I'm really uncomfortable about that, or that hurt me, or I feel disappointed about that, or actually I'm quite angry with that. My parents just didn't speak, or my mum didn't. And you'd have to work out what the hell that was about. And 99% of the time, as a child, I felt it was my fault.
Yes.
You know? So there was mixed messages. They did the best they could. We were reviews, we had lovely holidays, we had nice food. That's all they chose to do something different. So the first half of my children's life, they didn't get the best role model. But the second half now, I think it's amazing. I mean, my son's 29. And my husband went out to play pool with all three of them last night. We are such a close family. And that means we're able to say, you know, one of my sons, I'm obsessed by my sons. They're so beautiful. I was so strict with them. I can't believe they didn't ever not speak to me again. I was so strict and rigid about things. And they're lovely. I took a picture and I put it on Facebook. He was really angry about it. And he said, Mum, that's really not okay. I said, what's the problem? You know, I said, I love you. I'm proud of you. So I didn't listen to him and I put another one on. And he came to me and he said, Mum, you don't listen to me. I've said to you I'm not comfortable about that. That isn't okay. You might think it's fine, but I don't want that without your permission. So I was able to swallow a bit of humble pie and practice what I preach and say, do you know what, Elliot, I'm really sorry. That was awful. You're right, I didn't listen to you. And the reason why I didn't listen to you, it doesn't matter, but I had this perception that it was silly. And that's not okay because it's your choice. So I will not ever put you. He said, well, I don't trust you anymore. And I said, I don't blame you. Now, this wasn't my son's never going to talk to me again. He loves me. He said, but I don't trust you in that area because you've let me down. I said, that's right. So I have to prove that to you. And now, I don't know, a year or 18 months on, I always ask him, and I'm allowed to put a picture on Facebook on my birthday, Mother's Day, and possibly Christmas Day, and that's it. And I say to him, Elliot, is it okay? And there's no big drama, and then sometimes he says, I don't want you to. I said, fine, so I take it of his brothers. So I modelled something that I've had to learn myself, and they now are doing it themselves, even though they're much older adults. I'm like, that's so incredibly helpful in a relationship to say to your own mum, I'm not comfortable about it, and you lied to me, and I don't trust you. I don't take it like, oh my mother, or he never wants to speak to me again. I'm like, okay, Sandra, what are you going to do about it? Yeah. You make an amends and you do something different. It's not okay.
Wow. So that says something about honesty, communication, and also taking, not taken personally, but seeing it as a feedback, as something that, you know, comes from a person who cares. But it's wonderful that you've created a very healthy communication style, despite the fact that you're coming from a family where it wasn't so healthy. But through your self-development work, you managed to create conditions for your sons to be in a better place. And that's what we want to see in every person and enrich their life so they can enrich lives for the future generations.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I love linguistics. I love communication. You know, isn't it interesting? I didn't feel as a child I was heard. I was told a lot of things that weren't true, bless them, you know, just to keep children happy, and information that I knew wasn't correct. I knew, I'm very intuitive, and it was just to keep and upset children, and they shouldn't know all these things. And there were some things I agreed with that, and other things that weren't great. But I don't blame them. I just take what I've learned, mixed it in my own pot, and I say to my children, when you go to your counsellors and your coaches, I'm willing to say, hey, I didn't do a great job in that area, but I did the best I thought was right at the time. And that's, I think, the biggest word for me that I'm in love with, is authenticity. Just be yourself. You know, I know I'm impatient. My boys know that I get agitated about little things. They know I can be a bit, you know, emotionally, I'm, you know, a very emotional person. This is who I am. And I'm doing the best I can to be a better person every day. Doesn't mean I was a bad person yesterday, but there's all new learning, constantly new learning. And taking responsibility for myself and authenticity are the two key things, I think, in life. Take responsibility for your actions, look at the consequences, and am I willing to do the next smallest right thing?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Sandra. It's been fantastic to have you here and answering some challenging questions, but you're one of the models that we want to see in the world, one that comes to this life with some baggage, sorts itself, the baggage and yourself, and bring the new life for future generations and enriching their lives. So peace to you. Thank you very much.
It was an absolute privilege. I love it. You can see I love it. I love talking about healthy relationships because it's so easily attainable. It really is. Well, it is simple. I don't know if it's easy, but it is simple.
Great. Thank you.